Okay, guys, so let's get this out of the way really fast. First of all, I'm not as hooked into the community in Elden Ring, or Dark Souls for that matter, that I really would like to be. But that's okay. However, it does flavor some of my opinions. One of which being, if you can't make it through the PvE portion of the game with your PvP character, and I do mean all the way through, we're talking all the way to New Game Plus, then what is the point? I also do not agree with people that say PvE and PvP have no overlap because invasions exist. They're literally the only reason I care about this franchise, and that would completely disclude me from even playing the game. If invasions didn't exist, I would not waste my time with this franchise. No offense to people who like it for other reasons, but that's 99% of the reason I'm here. And without PvE, guys, I got no one to invade. I got the arena and Grace Goblins. I do not care about either. The Grace Goblins, I don't mind as much as everybody else. That's fine, whatever. I don't mind Gankers as much. Again, you got 3v1, opportunity to have a really good clip, whatever. But that's kind of the point, though. Is like your PvE guys, I kind of rely on them existing. I kind of rely on connectivity to them, which is what I'm going to get into here in a second. Now, Elden Ring has probably the biggest community that has lasted of any Souls game just due to sales of nothing else. But you look at that across the three platforms. You got Xbox, PlayStation, and PC. I would say Switch and all that stuff too, but I think some of that's just not Switch. Excuse me. I don't actually know if it's on that. Either way, we have a pretty good community, and the size is chunky now. So we've had options. No longer is 125 the de facto. It never should have been in the first place in certain games, and that's what I'm here to address. I've done this before, but I have a better way of arguing it now. Connectivity has always been the concern for me due to being an invader. If you are running a tournament, if your build is let's say level 80 plus 6 or plus 8 somber tournament, I don't care. That is not why I'm here. I will never interact with that, and that's just not going to happen. So I have to tailor my builds otherwise. Now, I'm saying a lot of this upfront so you guys understand where I'm coming from and you can have all this information. So when I tell you these things during this video, they make sense. That said, most people seem to finish their game when they don't restrict themselves anywhere between like 120, 130 to about 160 and 170 on a regular new game. And I've seen that everywhere from like completionists to casuals to pros to people who it just depends. Is really what it boils down to. And with that gap of say 120 to 170, that's where things like 138 came in, 150, and what have you. And when the game first launched, everybody wanted 125, and some other people tailored for 150. My argument here is both of these are wrong for several reasons, and I'm going to show you why. The classic argument has always been the higher in level you get, the more damage you will take because everybody can have ridiculous builds. That has been mirrored on some channels. I'm going to drop your name here, Stolovsky. He has done a lot of this, as has, say, Chase, Lost, and they're about the ones I keep up with as far as PvP guys go. And the damage doesn't seem as high to me as everyone talks about. Even though I've done invasions all the way up to 200, and 200 didn't feel kind of weird, but the damage wasn't crazy. What's possible there is just the open freedom you have. Now, let's go ahead and get into the numbers so I don't have to bore you guys to death with just me talking, looking at a plain screen. This is the Pyromancer build that I have set up at 138, and it was 125, and I couldn't stand it. It drove me crazy. That said, now that we're at 138, it's a lot more reasonable, and I really miss those 7 points of vigor, but here we are. Slave to the meta. And this is my primary, I guess, issue. People will come in here and say, yes, but the caster tax. And the caster tax is a very real thing. If you want an effective caster, you need a high mind stat. Okay? So you sack endurance most often to get it if you still want your damage, which you probably do. That said, I've seen people argue that there's no melee tax. And that's not true either. The melee builds all have low mind for the most part. I mean, every now and then you get a guy who balances it out pretty good, but usually they have higher endurance, and their talismans over here are not going to be like the Faithful's Canvas, Godfrey, Flock's Canvas, Moon of Noxdal. They're not running that. They have to run other things to make their melee options better and their defenses better. So, or their offense, or whatever they choose. But like, they're not running this is my point. This is part of the caster tax. This is part of like a melee build. We have Prosthesis, Rotten Winged Swords, Shard of Alexander, Godfrey Icon. Now the Godfrey Icon is the same because I really like it, but here we go. That's another good example. And you see over here with Mind 16, Endurance 20, it's split. It could be a little better in favor of Endurance, but again, I chose damage at 138. Check down here for 691. We'll come back to that later. With this Faith build, we're just going to move up in levels, and I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. Physical defense down here and all these modifiers are going, pay attention to these because they're going to move up by about a factor of 10 in flat damage. That's not a whole lot, but it is something. What does matter though is when you pop up, I can now have native 60 vigor. My mind can go to 40. And I got a couple other extra point stats to just throw wherever I want. A couple in strength, one in dex. Just whatever really, to make your build feel a little more comfortable. At 150. This is perfectly serviceable. I got no complaint here. This is just decent. I really would like more of this because I feel like a caster should probably also have a light roll, but you know, so far so good. Can't really complain. Now I'm going to move over to the other build real quick. This arcane build at 138 has not the problem. I chose life over damage. I could drop this down a little bit, get 50-50, but you'll see in a minute that that's not as important as you think. Moving up from here, we go to this. And you'll see the damage number doesn't go up by much. Now you can do this and get some additional stuff, but that's just because it has strength. And that's because it goes from 45 to 51 in each stat. At a case of 12 levels. Not a great change, right? Doesn't matter so much for the melee build. Matters a lot for the caster, though. This is where I think a lot of this problem comes in, is because the lower the level, the worse the caster usually is. And everyone hates casters for some reason. If you're running this, you got access to no weapons. You got Lord Sword, Straight Sword, and a bunch of other like very light tools. And you're choosing high damage spells. But like, what are you going to do with them? Most of what you're going to be doing as a faith build is probably catch flame at that point. Without that getting into a tirade, we're going to keep going. 50. Here it is at 164. Now this is kind of a weird place because you can start doing strange things with mind here. But 60, 40, 25, 11, 10, 7, 80. Now, more endurance is always going to be good, and the main reason for that on this is to try to push this into a light roll. Which, I mean, you can't see it here, but it gets it very close on the build I actually run. 164 does dodge 200, 168 doesn't, I don't think. But that's, again, kind of the same situation you're going to look at with this guy. And again, doing the comparison between 51 and 58 as strength and arcane for the damage, you're still getting good return down here. This isn't bad. And you have all your other stats where you want them. So tell me again why the level up is bad? Is it this? Is you just don't want people to have damage? That's what I've heard, okay? But you can just as much invest into endurance and slap on some fat armor and reduce that damage a lot. Which I don't see a lot of people talking about. Maybe because they're already doing it. Could be. Moving back to the faith build. You see right here we have, I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and move up to 200. Now the 200 one's kind of wacky. I still think 200 is a little weird. But I can get up to 50 endurance and have several more points to play around with. 50 is the cap, by the way. So I can just play around with this, run whatever lightweight armor I want, whatever heavy armor I want, if I don't mind mid-rolling all the way up. And there's absolutely plenty of points here to do whatever you want. But I can't cast sorceries. I have no access to arcane stuff. I barely have access to basic weapons, okay? And that's all because I chose light roll or heavy armor. Now, if I still got the faith, I mean, like, I got two things now. It's a caster, and these are my options. I feel like 200 is, it feels strange coming to it from like 138 and 125, but I feel like it's more accurate than it should be for anything else, and here's why. Let's go back to the arcane build. 742 damage, 58, 58. Let's bump over here, and you can see I only change a few points of endurance for 75, 75 strength arcane, and it bumps up to 797. 742, 797. That is significant. That's 50, roughly 50 points. Two hands, you can make it even higher, but again, strength build. If this is the only problem with builds that are higher in level, and I'm not seeing something, or something has just not occurred to me, or maybe I've got my math wrong, I don't know. It seems very strange to stay here, where this is not a big deal, air quotes, when you could be here. It's 100 AR, and just have a much better time of it as a melee build. And if you really want to get into the weeds of this, you can say that the caster getting 50 endurance is complete, baloney. Arguably, you could just go back to doing this and pick an actual weapon. Doesn't matter what it is. In fact, let's crank that up. Now the caster has access to regular weapons. Or good weapons. Unusual weapons. Take your pick, really. This is actually, now that I think about it, this is probably actually pretty decent stats to run the Magma Curve Sword. So, this is what I've got with this. It seems really strange to me that people would say 200 is a bad level based on numbers. Now let's get into the other portion of this that is a little less weird to me, and the part I actually care about is connectivity. Because I don't want to make a character at level 200, 138, or 164, 168, whatever. Bam. And then have to remake a whole bunch of the same character to play with different people on different levels regularly, or do invasions at these different levels, or just level them up, level them down, because I still do content with all these characters. This is where it irritates me. This is where it starts to really grind my nerves, that people will not sit down and say, yeah, this is all right, or this is where we probably should be, or this is where the community needs to focus on. Instead, it's just do you, boo, and everyone just kind of ignores it and does their own thing. The casuals were already going to do that. They were already going to ignore us. They don't care. But being able to catch most of those guys, because that's where the invasions are, is what matters. If that's 200 and I'm an idiot, please let me know in the description or in the comments below. If you're getting good at 150, none mind, I'm on PC, but that's not the point. If you're getting good invasion at 150, let me know. Please, please comment if you have any experience with this, because I'm at a loss sometimes. It feels very weird doing this from almost the sidecar and not having any real input from community members. It seems so weird. Now, like I said, I've seen Chase and Lost run 200 invasion builds, and they're all right. I got nothing against that. It's great. But nobody commits to any of this. They all just save characters at like 90 or 110, 120 or whatever, and then level them up for the run, and then that's it. And they're playing the game otherwise at like 110, 120. Now, maybe I'm wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure that's what's going on. So if you got thoughts on this, guys, please let me know. I am trying my best to keep this coherent and failing. So I'm going to end it here so you don't have to listen to me ramble anymore and look at a bunch of numbers on the screen. If you like this, like it, the whole YouTube stuff, you know how that goes. Take it easy.